Hi everybody, I'm Leah of CJ Drill, and if you're wondering why I'm wearing white today, well, let me tell you, we're going to do old world plastering. And if you've ever wanted to know how to do real plastering, I'm not talking this fake joint compound stuff, I'm talking the real deal. Today is the day. So this is our first coat that goes on, and it's called Structolite. It's a base coat, all right? And I'm going to open up the back because I want you to see what this material looks like. And let's get a close-up. I'm going to put a little bit in my hand here so that you get a good idea. Okay? It's gray. It's not light and fluffy like a molding plaster or slow set gauging. It's granular. All right, and this is the base coat. Now just make certain that you read the manufacturer's instructions for mixing up your base coat. It's just water that you're adding, but just make certain that you're using the right amounts of water to dry material. Now the other thing I want to mention is you can do it by hand if you've got a small area that you're doing, but realistically you want to use a mixing paddle attached to a drill. So this is what we want our base coat to look like. Okay? We want it to be that consistency. And if you notice, if you come in close, you can see how it's grainy. And what that is it's perlite. It's a perlited gypsum. That's what Structolite is. Now, you don't have to go with Structolite. You can go with another brand name if you would like, but Structolite is what I have always used for base coat. Okay, so this is our project. It's a ceiling where there was water damage and it destroyed the plaster. So I've knocked out all the bad area. As you can see here, the wooden lath is exposed. Now I'm going to take you through the whole process. I'm going to show you how to restore this plaster lath ceiling. When we're finished, you'll never know that there was ever a hole there. But right now, let's just start with the base coat. Now, we've got our wooden lath exposed, and the most important thing is just to make certain that these slats are nice and clean. If there's some existing plaster in between your slats, clean it out, because you want that plaster to do something called key in. And keying in, believe it or not, is the plaster oozing through the slats and locking that plaster in place, and that's what we want. So once it's clean, then you want to mist the wood, because the wood, misting the wooden lath, will actually help the base coat adhere. Now it's a little bit of a challenge because we're working above our head, but I'm going to show you all the tricks of the trade to get a very beautiful finish and job. Okay, so you want to have a board to put your base coat on. And something on a stable surface. So I've got my hawk here. This is my trowel. I'm going to lay my hawk here. I'm just going to scoop up a little bit, just a little bit. And what I'm going to do is clean it off right away. Because believe it or not, that's going to help my plaster stay on my hawk and not fall off. So here we go. Put that plaster on. Now I'm ready to start plastering the ceiling. Okay, now when you're working on a ceiling, you always want to work in front of you, because if plaster falls, okay, you don't want it falling in your face, especially not in your eyes if you're using lime. We'll get to that in the next step, because when we go to using lime, I'm going to be wearing eye protection, and I'm going to tell you why. So work in front of yourself, and I'm going to start at the edges. I'm going to hit my edges first, just to get the plaster locked in, all right? And the next thing you'll want to do is you'll want to hold your hawk underneath the area that you're working in, just in case, you know, a little bit of plaster drops, your hawk will catch it. So let's just start. Take a generous amount and just force it in to the sides of the plaster and where the lath is. So we're going to just force it in there. See what I mean? About catching it, I need to get a little bit more mud. There we go. Don't be afraid to apply pressure to it, because that's what you want. You want to apply pressure. And again, I'm just hitting the edges first. Always work in front of yourself. And use that hawk to catch any mud that may come down. All right? Okay, so now I'm going to start filling in the voids. And one thing you got to be mindful of is when you apply your plaster to wooden lath, you really have to apply some pressure because you want the plaster to key in, as I indicated before. All right, so now I'm going to fill in the voids. Now, believe it or not, it's deceiving because it takes a lot of plaster. And you just want to get as much mud up there as you can. I'm just going to continue on with the process till I have it all filled in. Now here's the thing, I've got it scratched in. That's my scratch coat, and I know it doesn't look pretty, but believe me, it's going to all work out. Now what I've got to do now is I've got to do what's called doubling up. Now I'm going to apply my second coat of base coat to my scratch coat. Now here's the thing, we're not in a big hurry because base coat really isn't time sensitive unless you're using an accelerator, which we are not, okay? So we're just going to take our time. Don't worry about it setting up on you because it just isn't going to set up anytime soon. So I'm going to double up. And really, what you want to do is you want to come out a little beyond the surface. You really want to make certain that it's a little beyond the surface of the old plaster because we're going to take our slicker and we're going to level it off, okay? You know, go back and forth. Don't be afraid to go back and forth. Okay, so and now it's time to level it. We want to level our plaster. We're going to use this tool here. It's called a slicker. And what it is it's a metal, it's magnesium, and it's a straight edge. Now, maybe you don't have a slicker. That is fine because it is a specialty tool that plasters use. You can use a piece of wooden siding. It will work just as well. Just make certain that what you're using is level, okay? Doesn't have any dips or the board isn't warped. Okay, so wet it down with water, and now I'm going to go up and I'm going to level off our ceiling. I have to tell you, this part of the process is really tricky, okay? Because you have to catch your brown coat when it's not too green, but you certainly can't wait until it's dry. If you wait until it's dry, you're going to have a really ugly patch. You're going to have a patch that people can see. It's going to stand out. You got to catch it at the right time. Now, I'm not certain whether or not our base coat is ready to knock down. I'm going to check it out, and I'm going to see now. What I'm going to do is you want to make a wiggly motion with your slicker or with your siding. Let's see what we got here. You know what? I think it's in good shape. I think we're good to go. All right. And level it off. Now once you've got it leveled with your slicker, now we're going to start the cut back process. And we're going to use our margin trowel to cut it back. But before we can do that, we're going to take our regular plaster trowel and you're going to take the back end of it and we're going to scrape along the edges, all right? Back end of the trowel, scrape the edges clean. Just like this. Scrape those edges clean. Don't worry about digging in too much. We just want to get the edges. And I'm going to continue around the perimeter of the patch doing what I just showed you. We're going to do something called cutting back. And this is so very important. This is a step that you cannot skip. If you skip this step, then you're not going to get a good finish with your putty coat. And you know, the putty coat is the line finish coat that goes on next. And what is cutting back? You can use a margin trowel, that's what this is, or you can use a finish trowel. And we're going to cut an outline. And that outline is going to be where the new plaster meets the old ceiling. And what you do is this. You just cut it. You want to follow plaster ceiling line. You just want to cut it back. See how I'm trimming that? And you want to continue that process around the whole perimeter. Now, if you don't have a margin trowel, you can use your finish trowel to cut it back. Why don't you come on in close so I can show you what that really looks like. Okay, can you see how I've cut this back a little bit? And that's all you're doing. You're cutting it back. You're following the existing plaster line all the way around the perimeter of the patch. Cut it back. Okay, now once you've got the perimeter cut or outlined, okay, just think of it as outlining it with your tool. Once you've done that, now what you have to do is you have to clean the new plaster off the existing old plaster. Take a brush and just bring it right up to the edge there. Get all that plaster off. Use a wet brush. Now, at some point, okay, once I get it pretty clean, I'm going to take a sponge and really clean the edges really good. And you want to continue this process all the way around your patch. Now it's time to apply what's called the putty coat. And what the putty coat is lime and then something called gauging, okay? And the gauging is what gets the lime to set up. There's a chemical reaction that happens, but the majority of the material that you're going to use is going to be lime. One thing about lime and gauging is you can't get these materials in a home improvement store or a hardware store. These materials you're going to have to purchase at a building supply store. Make certain that you wet your board before you put your lime on. Wet it really good. Okay, so our lime is on our board, okay? And if you come in close, let me show you what this looks like, really looks like, okay? It's very smooth. You want your lime to be very smooth. So this is what I want to say about lime. If you notice, I'm wearing eye protection. And the reason for that is lime is really, really caustic. And you also notice that I'm wearing gloves. And you want to wear gloves because let me tell you something. When I was plastering, every day 20 years ago, guys used to make fun of me because I didn't wear gloves. And they'd say, Leah, nobody will want to hold those hands. Because the reality is, when you're handling lime, it's caustic, it burns, it draws all the moisture out of your skin. And I'll tell you what, it'll make your hands really rough. So I wear gloves now, okay? And you're going to want to do the same thing. But the most important thing is when you're working with lime is eye protection, even when you've got it on the board and you're mixing it up. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to mix up our lime. And what I want to say about the lime is, you see the consistency of it. It's very thick but creamy. There's no lumps. You don't want any lumps in your lime because it's going to affect the finish, all right? So I've got my lime. And how you get it nice and creamy is you soak the lime in water. Soak it and then mix it. You can mix it by hand, but it's best if you mix it with a paddle and a drill. Now, the one thing about this lime is this, all right? Lime isn't going to set up on you. It can stay wet for almost ever. Well, not forever, but it'll stay wet a good long time. It takes something to activate it, to get it hard. And what that usually is gauging or a molding plaster. Well, we're going to use gauging, and we're going to use a slow set. Now, why a slow set? Well, so a slow set gauging will give you time, and it'll give you plenty of time. What you do is this. You take your trowel, your finished trowel like this, and you make a circle, okay? You make what's called like a plaster donut, and that's what we're going to do. Just going to make a circle right in the center, just like that, okay? We got our little plaster donut going. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fill the center with water. So I'm going to fill my little plaster donut up there with water. I'm not filling it all the way up, just a good amount. There we go. So we've got our plaster ring, we've got our water in the center. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add our gauging plaster to this center where the water is. And so I'm just going to sprinkle that on there. You want to put the dry right there in the center in the water. Now, you may be asking why. Why is it done this way? Well, here's the thing. It is easier to mix two wet materials together than to mix a wet material and a dry material. Again, it's easier to mix two wet materials than it would ever be to mix a dry with a wet. You'll get lumps that way. And if anything, you want your putty coat to be lump free. You want it to be smooth as icing. Okay, so I've got my gauging in here, and if you look over it, you'll see what we're going to do is we're just going to knock that into the water a little bit. Let that really soak up the water. And we got time. We'll let that stand. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to get hard. It doesn't start a chemical reaction till you mix the two together. So it's not going to go anywhere. We're just going to let that continue to soak up. Now we're going to go back up to the patch that we did yesterday because it's dry today. And I want to show you what we got going on up there. Okay, so our sealant. Hard as a rock because it is a rock, okay? Now what do we do? How do we prep this for the finish coat? Well, see all the stuff that's hanging down? You gotta knock that off. Because the last thing you want is you don't want any trash in your finish coat. So take the back of your blade, the back of your trowel here, just scrape all that loose stuff off. Now once you're satisfied, once you've gotten all the loose pieces that are hanging, the next step is, believe it or not, is we got to mist this a little bit with some water. Now, why would we let it dry out only to mist it? Well, here's the thing. What gets plaster to stick? That putty coat that we're going to put on, the finish coat, the white plaster, well, what gets it to stick is something called suction. So if I didn't mist this down and I just started putting my putty coat on, that dry base coat would suck all the moisture, okay? It would suck it out. And I might start to get a few cracks. It might start to go too quick on me. So I want to control the suction just a little bit. Now, I'm not wetting it down. I'm just misting it a little bit to kill that suction so that I can control it. So it's not going to draw all the moisture out of the line. Now, one thing that I always like to do is I like to wet my tools first. Always wet your tools before you work with them. Because if you have any dry material on there, you know, it'll start setting up. So wet your tools down really well. Our gauge is completely wet now, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to incorporate all that water in that gauging with the margin trowel first. Just get it going here a little bit, get that nice and incorporate it in the water before I start mixing in my lime. Okay, so I've got that. Now the next thing I do is this. You're going to want to use your hawk. That's what this tool is here, a hawk. And you're going to use your trowel in combination with each other to mix up the plaster. But before I do that, I'm going to make like an inner circle, a little inner circle in that lime, okay? Like this. Just a little inner circle. Like that, okay? So, well, why do I do it that way? The gauging in the center is a lot more wet than the putty, the lime putty that is circling it. And if we were just to start mixing it all up at once, it would run off the board. So what I've created is a little moat, okay? So now is time to really start mixing plasters together. Okay, so take your hawk and we're going to use the two tools together, but first I'm just going to use my trowel and I'm going to start mixing the gauging with that first amount of lime putty that I separated. So we're just going to go like this. Just take your time. You got plenty of time to work the plaster. Okay, so now it's not runny anymore, okay? It's pretty nice. It's nice and stiff. Now we're gonna start incorporating the outer rim of the line and working it together. Remember what I said about using your hawk to help incorporate it, cut it. Make certain you're wearing your glasses. Like I said, wear those safety glasses now because a little bit of line in your eye is very painful. And you just keep using that trowel to mix the two plasters thoroughly together. Okay, now what's interesting is getting the mud on the hawk, getting that putty on the hawk is the thing that really people have difficulty with, okay? So what I do is put your hawk right there. This is the hawk. Remember the square thing, the hawk. Okay, you want to use your trowel to scoop it up there on your hawk, all right? That's it. See? That's it. I'll do that again for you so you see how easy it is. Place your hawk close to the putty. Take your trowel, scoop it up on there, lift it. That's it. Now, I'm going to use a little bit more mud than that because I don't want to make too many trips to my mortar board, okay? So I'm going to put my mud up there, clean it off, and now I'm ready to go. Remember what I said about working in front of you? Well, the reason why you work in front of you is because when you're working with lime, you don't want to get an eyeful. So if you've always got your trowel in front of you, it cuts down on the chances that lime is going to get in your eye. Okay, so I might have a little bit of a challenge working in front of me because I have to keep in mind that I want you to be able to get the shot, okay? So if you see me working over my head, I don't want you to say, oh, Leah, what are you doing? It's because I want you at home to really be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so it doesn't take a whole lot because the finish coat goes on very thin. So I've got my mud, and actually that's too much. It's about how much mud you want. It's about how much putty coat, okay? And we're just going to apply it. And you apply it really thin. And you want to make certain that you do backwards and forwards, okay? Come to me a little bit. Get that mud in there. And get it on there. And you just repeat the process until you get the whole surface covered. Work it back and forth. Okay, so we've got our putty coat on. The whole base coat area is covered. Now it's a little bit of a waiting game, okay? Because what we want is we want that lime to start to get hard. But we don't want it dry hard. We just want it hard to the touch. Now I'm going to touch it just to see where we stand. Oh, you know what? We're really getting there. We're very, very, very close. As you can see, I'm putting my hand on it and it's firmed up, okay? Now, what I'm going to do now is if you look at the ceiling, you're probably saying, wait a second, Leah, you promised us that it would be nice and smooth as glass. Well, I'm going to water trowel it. But before I water trowel it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit it again. I'm going to hit it again with just a little bit of plaster to fill in all those cat faces and tracks. And sometimes you get little bubbles here. Just got a few bubbles. Got to knock down. That's the moisture coming out of that base coat. So now I'm going to fill in those imperfections and double up on my putty coat. All right? And this is all the plaster I need for that patch. Let me get started. It doesn't take much plaster at all to fill in those imperfections. Just keep working the plaster. And in a second, we're going to be ready to lay it down water trowel it, because a plaster never sands. Drywallers sand joint compound, but plasters use water to lay down their finish. So now my plaster is firm. It's ready to trowel down and trowel down to a nice glassy finish. Take out every imperfection with water, okay? So what you want to do is you want to use a nice beefy bristle brush. The bigger the better. This is kind of small, but if you can get your hands on a big brush, bristle brush, you'll want to use it. And you want to make certain that you use clean water as well. I'm going to start laying it down. I'm going to lay that water on there. And generally, okay, now it's a little awkward for me because I want to make certain that you can see what I'm doing. But normally what happens is your trowel follows your brush. It's generally the way it works. Do you notice the difference that makes? The water makes all the difference in the world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue water on my finish. Water on my finish. There we go. And that's what you want to do. Let your trowel do the work and let the water be your sandpaper. So folks, that's it. We're finished. We laid it down with water. All we have to do is wait for the plaster to cure and we can prime it and paint it. This is Leah saying, you can do this. See you next time.